"Daddy, I'm hungry," 5-year-old Violet whined, tugging on Damien's sleeve as he yanked open the hood of his old truck. She stood beside him in her faded pink unicorn sweatshirt, her curls frizzy from the humid spring air. "I know, baby. Just a second," Damien said, voice strained as he examined the mess of wires and smoke curling from under the hood. The truck had died right in front of the gas station, and he didn't have the money for a tow. Again. He glanced at his watch. He had 40 minutes to get Violet to the community daycare and himself to his second shift at the auto shop. If he missed another day, his boss had made it clear he'd be out for good. That's when the black SUV pulled up at the curb, its tires crunching over gravel. The window rolled down, and a woman leaned out, looking completely out of place in this part of town. Sleek navy blazer, hair twisted into a low bun, gold hoop earrings, and a face that screamed New York boardroom, not rural Tennessee gas station. "Hi, sorry," she called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "I think I'm completely lost." Damien wiped his greasy hands on his jeans and stepped closer, shielding Violet with his arm out of habit. "Where you trying to go?" She exhaled hard. "I'm supposed to be meeting the investors from Keller and Sons at a construction site about 15 minutes from here. I got off the highway too early, and now my GPS is just spinning." "Yeah, signal's trash out here," Damien said, nodding. He stepped closer to her car, giving her a better look. Shirt slightly oil-stained, hair a mess, and worry lines carved deep across his brow. "You're only about 10 minutes off. I can draw you a map." She blinked. Seriously, that would be amazing. "Just give me a sec." He reached back into his truck, pulled out a crumpled envelope from the glove box, and wrote quick directions on the back with a half-dead pen. "You'll hit a fork in the road, go left, not right. GPS always says right, but that'll take you to a cow field." She laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "Good to know, thank you, Damien," he said, offering a hand. "Damien Archer." She shook it, "Sienna Knox." Her hand was warm, her grip firm, and for a second, their eyes locked. Long enough for something to shift in her expression, like she saw something in him that didn't match everything else around them. Sienna glanced toward Violet, who stood behind Damien with wide blue eyes and a juice-stained mouth. "And who's this?" "My daughter, Violet." Sienna's face softened even more. "Hi, Violet, I love your shirt." Violet beamed. "Unicorns are my favorite." "Mine too," Sienna said with a wink. Damien looked between them, something about the exchange tugging at his chest. "You should get going, you'll be late." "Right, yes, thank you again," she said, gripping the wheel. But just as she was about to put the car in drive, she hesitated. "Actually, do you need a ride somewhere? I mean, your truck looks—" "We're fine," Damien said quickly, not wanting to look like a charity case. Sienna opened her mouth, then closed it. "Okay, well, maybe I'll see you around." He gave her a polite nod and stepped back. The SUV pulled away, kicking up dust. Damien didn't expect to see her again. But Sienna couldn't stop thinking about him. Something about the way he stood tired but protective, weathered, but kind it stayed with her all through her meeting. Even when the site manager complimented her presentation, even when the investors shook her hand and told her she was the only reason they were considering the deal, she kept thinking about that man with grease on his hands and his daughter clinging to his side. 3 days later, she was back in that town. She didn't tell anyone, not her assistant, not her coworkers. She just rented the SUV again, skipped her meetings in Nashville, and found herself driving past the same gas station. The truck wasn't there, neither was he. She drove a little farther and spotted a small, beat-up auto shop with a sign that read Pete's Garage. Inside, through the open bay, she saw him. Damien was wiping sweat from his forehead, leaning over a lifted car, tool in hand. His shirt was different cleaner, but the same quiet intensity was there. She parked and walked in before she could talk herself out of it. "Hey," she said. Damien looked up surprised. "Sienna." "Yeah, sorry, I know this is weird. Just wanted to say thank you again and maybe take you to lunch." He wiped his hands on a rag, eyes narrowing. "Why?" Sienna blinked. "Why?" "People like you don't usually come back here unless they forgot something." She tilted her head. "People like me. Expensive shoes, clean car, your GPS works in your neighborhood." She crossed her arms. "You think that's all I am? You don't even know me." Damien raised a brow. "And you don't know me." Sienna stared at him for a beat, then smiled. "Then maybe lunch is a good place to start." He looked at the clock, then at the other mechanic. "Pete, I'm taking my break." Pete waved him off. "Go, you never take it anyway." Sienna and Damien walked across the street to a tiny diner with cracked vinyl booths, and a waitress named Linda who didn't even ask for Damien's order. As they sat, Sienna leaned forward. "So, you're a single dad?" "Yeah." "That's a lot." He nodded. "It is." She stirred her coffee. "You're doing a good job, Violet's sweet, happy." Damien looked up at her, really looked. "You didn't come back just to say thank you, did you?" Sienna shrugged. "Maybe I wanted to see if the man who was kind to a lost stranger was as real as he seemed." He smiled, a small, tired thing that still made her stomach flip. "I'm real, just not much to offer." "I'll be the judge of that," she said softly. And somewhere between the grilled cheese and the cherry pie, something shifted between them. Something neither of them expected. And neither of them could ignore. Damien wasn't sure what possessed him to say yes when Sienna asked if she could pick him up after work the next day. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch at the grease under his nails, or how she asked questions like she genuinely wanted to hear the answers. Maybe it was the fact that Violet hadn't stopped talking about the lady with the shiny earrings. He felt out of place when the black SUV pulled up again, its engine humming quietly at the curb in front of the garage. Damien had changed into the cleanest shirt he owned and made sure Violet's curls were braided down tight. She was staying with his neighbor, Ruth, who had 3 grown children and a soft spot for Violet since the day she was born. Sienna leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open. "You always this punctual." Damien climbed in. "Only when I don't have a choice." She glanced at him as she pulled away. "You hungry?" "Always." "I found a place. It's about 20 minutes out but worth it. You trust me?" Damien looked over at her, her jaw set with quiet confidence. "No," he said deadpan, "but I'm curious." That made her laugh, and she didn't try to fill the silence after. He liked that. The restaurant she brought him to wasn't one he'd ever seen. It sat tucked behind a row of oak trees, with wrought iron lanterns swinging over a stone path. The valet gave him a look, but didn't say anything when Sienna handed over the keys like she owned the place. Inside, the air smelled like roasted garlic and something he couldn't name. The lighting was low, the tablecloths were white, and the waiter didn't blink when Sienna asked for a bottle of wine Damien couldn't pronounce. He kept his hands in his lap. Sienna noticed, uncomfortable. "No," he lied. She tilted her head. "You know, didn't bring you here to impress you." "I didn't think you did." "Then what's with the stiff shoulders?" He hesitated. "Places like this don't usually have room for people like me." "Maybe they should," she said, lifting her glass. Damien didn't answer. He watched her instead, the way she scanned the menu like she already knew what she wanted, the way she folded her napkin neatly across her lap. She didn't fidget. She didn't apologize for ordering the filet mignon. She didn't ask him what he did for work like she was trying to compare income brackets. Instead, she said, "What's Violet into?" He blinked. What? Your daughter, what does she like? He let out a breath, caught off guard. Science experiments, anything messy. She asked me last week why the moon doesn't fall out of the sky. Sienna grinned. That's a solid question. She gets it from her mom. Her expression shifted just slightly. Where is she, if you don't mind me asking? Damien looked down at his water glass. She passed, a few years ago. Sienna didn't offer condolences. Instead, she nodded once, like she understood that grief didn't need a spotlight. So you've been doing this alone. Yeah. Their food arrived, and for a while, they ate in silence. Damien wasn't used to steak that cut like butter or waiters who refilled his water before he noticed it was low. He definitely wasn't used to women like Sienna women who didn't look at him like he was a project or a mistake. After a sip of wine, she leaned forward. You ever think about doing something else? He frowned. Like what? Starting your own shop. You clearly know what you're doing. He laughed once. Owning a business takes more than elbow grease. I know, it takes capital, strategy, sometimes the right partner. He raised an eyebrow. Are you offering? Not yet, she said, but I'm wondering what you'd say if I did. I'd say you don't know a damn thing about me. Then tell me. Damien sat back watching her. You always this direct. Only when, find something interesting. The waiter brought dessert on the house, Sienna said with a wink at the man, and Damien didn't argue. He was too busy trying to make sense of the way this woman looked at him like he wasn't broken. Like he was something she wanted to understand, not fix. When they stepped outside, the night was warm and thick with the scent of spring. Sienna didn't rush to the car. She walked slow, heels tapping against the pavement. You want to know the truth? Damien said, hands in his pockets. I don't get it. You get what? Why you're here, why you came back. Why you're asking about Violet and business plans and acting like I'm someone worth. You don't see it, she interrupted. See what? You act like you're invisible, Damien. Like the world isn't allowed to see you unless you're under a truck or behind a counter. But you're solid. You're decent, and that scares people more than you think. He stared at her, stunned into silence. Sienna stepped closer. I came back because I wanted to. No one made me, no one asked me. I wanted to. Damien didn't move. His heart was pounding in his ears. She looked up at him. You don't have to say anything. I wasn't going to, he said quietly. They stood like that for a long second, the only sound the wind in the trees. Then he said, I don't know what this is. Me neither, she replied, but I know it's not nothing. He nodded slowly. I should get back. I'll drive. No, he said, I'll walk. She frowned. It's late. I need the air. Sienna didn't argue. She just handed him a small white box with the leftover dessert inside and said, Give this to Violet. Tell her it's from the unicorn lady. Damien took it, unsure how to say thank you for a night that had cracked something open inside him. As he watched her drive away, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. The sun had barely risen when Damien stepped into the kitchen, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. Violet sat at the table, swinging her legs and humming as she dipped a spoon into her cereal. Her hair was still braided from the night before, and a chocolate smudge clung to the corner of her mouth. Daddy, are you going to see the unicorn lady today? She asked, licking milk off her spoon. Damien paused mid-step. Maybe. You should, she said matter-of-factly. She gives good pie. He fought the urge to laugh. That's not exactly a reason to spend time with someone. Violet shrugged. I liked her. Damien didn't respond. He reached into the cabinet, pulled out 2 lunch containers and started packing for the day. As much as he tried to push the night with Sienna to the back of his mind, it kept pressing forward. The way she looked at him like she didn't see small town limits or the weight of his past, but something else entirely. He'd barely finished tying his boots when Ruth knocked on the side door, her floral apron dusted with flour. "You heading out?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. She kissed Violet's forehead. "I'll take her to the playground later. Let her run wild." Damien handed her Violet's packed bag. "Thanks, Ruth." "Don't thank me. She's better company than most adults I know." He kissed his daughter goodbye and stepped outside, the morning air sharp and clear. The walk to the garage helped him think. He didn't have answers, but something in his gut told him this thing with Sienna wasn't going away. By late afternoon, he wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against the garaged open bay. Pete was inside, arguing with a supplier over the phone, and Damien was glad for the moment alone. That was when the sleek sedan pulled up. But it wasn't Sienna. The man who stepped out wore a fitted blazer and shoes that cost more than Damien's monthly rent. His hair was slicked back, his jaw tight as he scanned the shop. "You Damien Archer?" he asked. Damien straightened. "Yeah." "I'm looking for Sienna Knox." His shoulders tensed. "She's not here." The man narrowed his eyes. "She's been missing meetings, canceling calls. She's not answering her phone. That's not like her." Damien crossed his arms. "Maybe she's busy. Or maybe she's distracted." "Is that a problem?" The man stepped closer. "It is when she's about to close the largest development deal our firm's seen in 5 years. We're not in the business of chasing ghosts." Damien held his ground. "Then maybe you should talk to her instead of showing up here." The man pulled a card from his jacket and dropped it onto the workbench. "Tell her Daniel Bishop stopped by, and tell her to stop playing house." He turned and walked off before Damien could respond. That night, Sienna knocked on Damien's door. He opened it, surprised to see her without her usual polish. Her blazer was gone, her blouse wrinkled, and her eyes tired. "I heard you had a visitor," she said. "Daniel Bishop," he replied. "Friend of yours." "Old colleague. He's also the firm's head of operations." Damien stepped aside, letting her in. Violet was already asleep, her soft snores drifting from the bedroom. Sienna sat at the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. "So what is this?" Damien asked. "A detour, a break from the real world?" "No," she said quietly. "It's the first time in years I've felt like I can breathe." He didn't speak. "I've spent the last decade climbing a ladder I don't even remember leaning against. The deals, the dinners, the networking, it's all noise. And then I got lost and met you." Damien leaned against the doorframe. "You're not exactly built for this place." "Maybe not, but I'm not asking to move in. I'm asking to matter." He stepped closer. "You already do." She looked up at him. "Then why does it feel like the more time I spend here, the more I'm about to lose everything I've worked for?" "Because you probably are." That hit harder than she expected, but Damien wasn't finished. "Sienna, I respect what you've built, but it can't be the reason it falls apart." "And what if I don't care anymore?" "Then you need to figure out why." She stood, tension pulling at her shoulders. "I thought I had." He watched her, unsure of what to say. Then quietly, she said, "I'm supposed to be in Chicago tomorrow. The board is flying in. They want confirmation I'm still in control of the project." Damien's jaw tightened. "And are you?" Sienna walked to the door but paused before opening it. "I know what this looks like to people like Bishop, but I'm not playing house, Damien. I'm trying to decide if the life I built is really the one I want." She left without another word. The next morning, Damien walked into the garage early, but he couldn't focus. Every wrench in his hand felt wrong. Every conversation with Pete blurred. Sienna's words kept spinning in his head. By noon, he made up his mind. He called Ruth and asked if Violet could stay the night. Then he pulled out the envelope, where he'd written Sienna's directions the first time they met. He flipped it over and wrote a note of his own. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Lexington Plaza Tower buzzed with low voices and tapped pens. Sienna stood at the head of the long glass table, her presentation slides glowing behind her, but her mind wasn't on the numbers. Not on the acquisition. Not even on the multi-million-dollar contract she was supposed to finalize today. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Violet's paint-splattered hands, Damien's guarded stare, the way his voice softened when he talked about his daughter. She saw the way her reflection had changed in the mirror, not just tired, but different. Lighter. Miss Knox, one of the partners said, adjusting his cufflinks. We're still waiting on your final position on the Ridge Creek development. Is your team aligned? Her fingers curled against the edge of the table. They are. And you. She looked out the window. The skyline was a sharp contrast to the slow, open roads of Tennessee. Everything here moved fast. Everything was polished, expensive, and loud. I'm stepping back from the project, she said. The room went silent. Daniel, seated near the middle, leaned forward. I'm sorry, what? I've submitted a full transition plan. You'll have it within the hour. My assistant has already coordinated a handoff with the regional lead. You walk away now, Daniel said, voice clipped, and they'll think we're unstable, that you're unstable. Sienna turned toward him. Let them. You're throwing away everything you've built. For what? She met his eyes without hesitation. For something real. Later that night, Damien sat on the porch steps of his house, elbows resting on his knees, note still folded in his hand. He hadn't mailed it, hadn't delivered it. Something had stopped him, pride, maybe, or fear. The crunch of tires on gravel made him rise. An unfamiliar car, a silver hatchback, dust-covered and modest, pulled up to the curb. The door opened. Sienna stepped out. Not in heels, not in a suit. She wore jeans and a soft, faded t-shirt, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders, wind-swept and natural. She looked nothing like the woman who'd once asked him for directions. And yet, more like herself than ever. I quit, she said before he could speak. Damien blinked. You what? I walked away, from the project, from the firm, from all of it. He stared at her, stunned. I couldn't do it anymore, she continued. I was building something that didn't fit me. It looked good on paper, but it never felt right. Not until I ended up lost in front of your truck. He stepped off the porch. Are you sure this isn't just a reaction? You've worked too hard to. I'm not asking you to catch me, she interrupted gently. I'm standing on my own, for the first time in years. He exhaled slowly, eyes scanning her face. So what now? She took a step closer. Now I'm here. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't know how to change a tire, but I know one thing. Damien tilted his head. What's that? I want to be wherever you and Violet are. The door behind them creaked open. Violet peeked out, rubbing her eyes. Is the unicorn lady staying for dinner? Sienna crouched. If it's okay with you. Violet nodded sleepily. Can we have pancakes? Damien laughed, the sound low and genuine. We can make that happen. They moved inside together. The kitchen was small, the cabinets chipped, but the warmth that filled the space was unmistakable. Sienna flipped pancakes while Violet poured too much syrup, and Damien watched them both, something loosening in his chest he hadn't even realized was clenched. After Violet fell asleep on the couch, curled up with her stuffed rabbit, Damien stepped outside. The air was cool, stars scattered across the sky. Sienna joined him, tucking her hands into her pockets. "I thought I had to be someone else to be enough," she said quietly. "That if I didn't chase the next deal, I'd disappear." "You're not disappearing," Damien said. "You're finally showing up." She looked up at him, expression open. "You once asked why I came back." "Yeah. I came back because I didn't want to forget what it felt like when I was with you. When I was just a woman, not a title." He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And who are you now?" "Someone who wants to build something that lasts, with you." He didn't hesitate. He kissed her, slow and certain, not because it was dramatic or earned, but because it was real. Because he finally believed that maybe love didn't have to be complicated, just honest. When they pulled apart, she smiled at him. "You still have that map I wrote on." He laughed. "It's in my glove box." "Good," she said. "Keep it, just in case I ever get lost again." He wrapped an arm around her and pulled her close. "You're not going anywhere." And this time, she knew he was right. They didn't promise forever. They didn't need to. Because for the first time, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Together. The scent of fresh paint lingered in the air as Damien unlocked the door of the newly finished space downtown. Violet clung to his free hand, her backpack bouncing against her side. Sienna walked just ahead, her hair pulled into a soft twist, clipboard tucked under one arm, and a bright gleam in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The building had once been a boarded-up hardware supply store, forgotten behind the old courthouse. Now, large windows faced the street, and a new sign above the entrance. "Is this ours now?" Violet asked, stepping inside and peering up at the tall ceilings. "Yours too, kid," Damien said, lifting her onto a stool tucked behind the reception counter. "You're the boss of the waiting room." Her eyes widened. "Can I have a fish tank?" Sienna knelt beside her. "Only if you feed them." "I'll feed them every day, even Sundays." Damien chuckled quietly as he crossed to the large service bay. The lift was installed, the tools were mounted, and the floor had been sealed just the night before. But what made his chest tighten was the name on the invoice pad resting on the new desk in the back office, Archer and Knox. The print was clean, permanent. Sienna leaned against the doorway behind him. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" He met her gaze. "It feels like it's actually mine." She walked in, her voice softer. "It is, this whole place. It's all yours, you built it. I just helped push the paperwork." "You did more than that." He stepped toward her, hands in his pockets. "You didn't just back me up. You believed in me before I even believed in myself." Sienna reached up, brushing her thumb along the edge of his jaw. "You didn't need someone to save you. You just needed someone to see you." He tilted his head, eyes fixed on hers. "What do you see now?" "A man who's exactly where he's meant to be." He pulled her gently into him, arms wrapping around her waist. "So are you." She leaned into his chest, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I don't miss any of it, not the boardrooms or the flights or the hotel coffee. Not even the fancy wine." "I have better now," she said. "I have pancakes with too much syrup and a little girl who calls me the unicorn lady." They laughed together, the sound echoing softly through the empty office. Later that afternoon, they held a quiet opening. A few locals wandered in curious glances, warm greetings, and one woman from the mayor's office who offered to list them on the town's new business directory. Damien fixed a flat tire for a young couple who'd driven in from the outskirts and didn't charge a thing. Sienna handled the paperwork like she'd been doing it forever, and Violet drew a crooked picture of the shop with crayons and taped it to the front window. When the sun dipped low, Damien locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. Sienna had taken Violet to Ruth's for a sleepover, promising her a pillow fort and popcorn. Damien stood in the middle of the shop floor, hands on his hips, staring at everything they'd built. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him until she wrapped her arms around his waist. "You did good today," Sienna whispered. "So did you." She stepped around him, dragging a folded blanket from the office and laying it on the floor beneath the wide window. "Come sit with me." He joined her, stretching out with his back to the wall, legs extended beside hers. Outside, the stars blinked through the glass, and the streetlight cast soft gold across her profile. "I used to think love had to be dramatic," she said, voice low, "like it had to come with fireworks or heartbreak or some grand sacrifice. And now I think it's this, quiet, steady, real." Damien turned to face her fully. "I never thought I'd have this again. After Violet's mom, I didn't think I'd be capable of loving someone the way she deserved." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You didn't just love her. You raised a daughter who dances in the kitchen and believes in unicorns. That's not failure. That's proof." He swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. "You're the first person who's made me feel like I'm more than what I lost." Sienna leaned in, her lips brushing his. "You're everything I didn't know I needed." They kissed slowly, unhurried, like there was nowhere else in the world they needed to be. A week later, under the wide oak tree behind Ruth's house, Sienna stood barefoot in a pale blue dress, her hand in Damien's as Violet sprinkled flower petals in front of them with intense concentration. Pete officiated, reading from a handwritten note he called a non-official but deeply sincere declaration of commitment. The guests were few, the ones who mattered. No press, no pretenses, just love beneath a sky streaked with the colors of late spring. As they exchanged rings' simple, unadorned bands, Sienna whispered to Damien, "This isn't a vow to be perfect, just a vow to try, every day." He nodded, eyes locked on hers, "And to never go back to who we were before we found each other." After the ceremony, they danced barefoot on the grass, and Violet insisted on cutting the cake first. Sienna tried to keep her dress clean. She failed spectacularly. That night, Damien carried her across the threshold of their new home, an old farmhouse they'd bought outside of town, with peeling shutters and a wraparound porch she already had plans to paint. Violet's room had been the first one they finished. The walls were covered in stars. As they lay in bed, the windows open to the sound of crickets and rustling trees, Sienna curled into Damien's side. "I used to think I had everything," she whispered. "The job, the money, the power, but it turns out everything looks a lot like this." He kissed her temple. "You gave it all up." She smiled against his chest. "No, just traded up." They fell asleep like that, limbs tangled, hearts full, their world quiet and whole. And nothing was missing, not anymore.